Go.
Okay, so welcome everybody to the League of Women Voters, where I'm doing a presentation on Know Your Rights, voting in New Jersey, and I'm Barbara Coopersmith. I am the chair, Voter Services Chair of the local league, which is for the Morristown area, which includes Mendham, Madison, a lot of different areas. And I am going to make this presentation with the help of Liza Weisberg, who's staff attorney for the American Civil Liberties Union. We do a lot of different types of presentations, and in this one I'll be talking about how to register to vote, how to check your voting record, who can register, how you vote by mail, which is BBMs, and the security of voting and more. And I know you may have questions, so we did get some that were presented to us beforehand. We will answer those at the end, and hopefully I will answer all your questions so you won't need to ask any from the live audience. So just a little bit about the league. We've been in existence for over 100 years. We're a nonpartisan, grassroots, member-based organization. We continuously educate and empower voters, and we defend democracy and support voting rights. So a little bit about voting. First of all, you got to be ready to vote, so make a plan. And if you aren't registered, you need to register. I'm guessing most of the people here are, but you never know. You might have kids, relatives, whatever that aren't. So I can help you with that. If you're not sure if you're registered or not, later on in the presentation, I'll show you where you can check. And then you also want to learn about the candidates. So we have a website, vote411.org is our website, and it teaches you, I'll talk a little more about that later on too. Then how can you vote? You can vote in person, early voting, or an election day, or you can vote by mail by requesting a mail-in ballot. So as the voter service chair, one of my most important tasks is setting up candidate debates and forums. And this is one of the ways, a great way for you can find out about the candidates. We do this for all local elections and Board of Ed races. Last year we did Congressional District 11, which is a national race. This year, we are inviting all legislative, county clerk, and commissioner candidates to partake, including the Board of Education. You can view all our past debates and this presentation on the League of Women Voters Morristown area YouTube channel. You can also use Vote 411. Like I said, that's the League of Women Voters Nonpartisan Voters Guide that provides customized information on voting. Users enter their address and can see what will be on the ballot when they vote. They can see biographical information and answers to league post questions from the candidates that respond. So the candidate, we send out a thing, it's a link. We do not do anything about the posting, but they have to respond to the invite. And it provides candidate information down to the local level, which is really good because committee people or Board of Ed people, there's usually not much out there. You know, if you're voting for president or senator, you're going to see a lot of things. And then there's also links where you can check your registration status. So a little bit about voter registration. So voting eligibility. First things first, you must be registered, okay? The slide lists the ways you can register, the registration requirements in New Jersey. And one of the things that the league worked on with a lot of our partners is in March 2020, people who are on parole or probation can vote. They may need to re-register or register, but they can vote now, which was not something they could do in the past when they were out, not in jail. And then what if you don't have a permanent address? If you're homeless, you may register to vote by providing a contact point or the location where you spend most of your time. And I think that's a really important thing. People ask me a lot of times because unfortunately, Morristown, I know specifically, and a lot of other towns have a lot of homeless people there. So the question we have now is, what location can you register to vote? What's your domicile? So I'm going to let Liza answer this question.
Thank you. So I got called up to do the lawyerly thing where you sort of hedge and hem and haw and say it depends. And I had that privilege because this is a legal question. And the fact is that domicile is a legal concept. So basically the statute in New Jersey says that you can register in a place where you actually reside. And courts have said your residence is equal to your domicile. And essentially a domicile is a permanent home. And courts have expressed what that means in different ways. Some of them have talked about your permanent home or your domicile being the place where you are enmeshed in community, where you have a stake in the outcome of local decisions. Others have said it in slightly drier fashion as simply the place where you have your abode and the present intention to remain. Basically, the place where you lay your head and the place where you intend to stay for the foreseeable future, and where, if absent, you intend to return. And so courts have also pointed to some relevant factors that you can sort of look to if this concept is a little fuzzy for you. So they've named some billing address, where your tax returns are filed from, mailing address, membership in local clubs, what your driver's license says, the place where you spend the most amount of time, newspaper subscriptions, and the like. That's a court's set of factors, not mine. Another, I think, important thing to know is that you can only have one domicile at a time. So you may have 5 houses scattered across the country if you're lucky, but there's only one domicile for your legal purposes. And you keep it until you establish a new one, right? So that is your domicile until a new one supersedes it. So if you're temporarily living somewhere else, you retain your previous domicile unless and until you set out to create a new one. That's all I've got on domicile.
Okay, so thank you, Liza. And I remembered to say Liza. All right, so how can I register to vote? So you can register at the Motor Vehicle Commission. And what's happening nowadays is that it's a relatively new thing that when someone gets their license for the first time, and that's mostly younger people, they automatically are registered to vote unless they opt out. Really good friend of mine, very involved, her son opted out because he said, I didn't know what I was signing up for. I didn't want to do it. But most people do it that way. So that's good. And if you change your address and you're going to motor vehicle, you change your address for voting too. You can do it online, which is wonderful. You cannot ask to get a vote by mail online, but you can register online, and you can do it in person at the county clerk's office or by mail. And I have those forms here. And one of the things the New Jersey League is working on with their partners is setting up same-day voter registration so that we don't have to have a deadline that you have to register to vote now. So what do we do with college students? People are always asking me this. So if you're in college in New Jersey, you have the option to register from your college address or your parents' address, regardless of what your permanent address is. That's a New Jersey law. And so we have situation one, a student's address, permanent address is in New Jersey, but they attend school in a different address in New Jersey. So I live right near Drew, and a lot of kids there, they're down in South Jersey, but they're in school in Drew. They can choose to vote at their permanent address, either in person or by mail, or they can vote at their school address. So a student does not need to change their driver's license in order to establish residency to vote from a New Jersey campus. Situation two, students' permanent address is in New Jersey, but they attend school in a different state, not New Jersey. And in this case, they can vote at, I hope people can read this. They can vote at the permanent address, which is their home address with their parents or whoever. And if that state allows it, they can vote in that state. So for example, New Jersey does allow it. I'm guessing California allows it. I don't know if like Georgia or Mississippi or even Maine allow it. All right. And then just a little note, they can register and vote from only one location. That's the key, one location. And it does not affect their eligibility for federal financial aid or their parents being allowed to take them as a dependent on their taxes. So the next thing we wanted to talk about is, when does a voter become inactive? There's a lot of stuff on here, but it become inactive when an election mail is undeliverable, but they can still vote and restore their status. They're inactive, but they're not unregistered. An inactive voter doesn't receive sample ballots, and they're not eligible to receive a vote by mail ballot until they are back to active status. They mark as inactive when their address comes into question, usually because their sample ballot is returned as undeliverable. If a sample ballot is returned as undeliverable, that inactive voter is sent a confirmation notice telling them that they have a period of 2 federal election cycles, and that's not just president, it's also congressional. And if not, they will be removed from the rolls, and then they become not a voter and they'd have to re-register. Who should submit a new registration form? What you can do on the voter registration form, you can change your address, got married. Nowadays, not as much, but if you need to, you can change your name. If you're on parole or probation, you need to re-register. Or if you need to update your signature. If you're someone like me, I signed my form 30, whatever you let's say how many years ago, and my signature is different now. And you want, if you're doing a vote by mail or even signing into the poll book, you want to make sure that it's not different. Okay, a little bit about voting in New Jersey. So we have this year state and local elections coming up. So state senate, state assembly, county commissioners, they used to be freeholders, school board, municipal offices. I think I forgot to put in here, the county clerk is up for re-election. As of now, except for Washington, I believe Washington County, or maybe just Washington Town, there are no ballot questions. So they shouldn't be on there. If they are, the league usually does an evaluation of them. And I just want to say state and local elections are really important. People forget, oh, I need to vote for president. Well, the state legislators and the county people determine how your taxes are spent. And they get a lot of your money. They're the ones that decide who gets a grant. They're also the ones, especially at the state level, so they want to pass the ERA amendment, who can vote and how, fair districts, better ballots, all of that comes at the state level. And I know someone that I know that she lost by 6 votes. Can you imagine if 7 people of her friends had voted? I'm sure 7 of her friends did not vote. She would have won. So it's really important to vote. All right. This is a table. I have a copy of it on my table. It's info, it's dates and deadlines. The most important is to remember October 17th is the last day to register to vote, and October 31st is the last day to ask for a vote by mail ballot that has to be received in the county clerk's office. Okay. This is just things about how you can vote. Like I mentioned before, vote by mail or vote with a paper ballot. You can vote in person on machines, and you can do that either early or late. I'm not late, I'm sorry, either early or on the day of the election. We don't want you to be late, it won't work. All right. All right, and this is the voting process. You will receive a sample ballot with your polling location. Starting on October 25th, they start mailing them out. It's only as fast as the mail is. Early in-person voting will be in place. It's only in certain locations. It's not in every normal location. On election day, you'll be able to vote on machines at your usual location. Okay. So just a little more detail about voting early. For the regular election, it's 10 days in advance. So right now it's Saturday, October 28th through Sunday, November 5th. Monday through Saturday is 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. Sunday is 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. They do not do it the day before the election because the county needs time to get everything set up in the regular polling places for Tuesday. And it's a great way for people to be able to vote. You know, the league was involved with other civic-minded partners to get this passed. And we're now, like I said, we're now working on same-day voter registration being passed. Okay, and I think I said that already. Okay. And one of the reasons we can do that, you can vote in any location, and I think it's so much better. There are electronic polling books they use now, they're tablets. So they can say, oh, you didn't go vote in Mendham, and now you're trying to go vote in Morristown because it's right there. They are going to see it. They also see if you need a vote by mail. You said you had a vote by mail ballot or anything like that. And we'll talk a little bit about what would happen then. I know sometimes people, you know, I think it was 2017, 2018, it was made that anybody that asked for a vote by mail ballot, even for that 1 year, they automatically got it for all future elections. Most people, I think, have done, you know, straightened this out. Or let's say you asked for it for just one election and you filled out the form and it's all elections. You can opt out of vote by mail. I have the forms here. Again, the deadline for that is August 31st if you want to be able to vote in person. And I think a lot of people, now that you can vote early, don't feel they need the vote by mail in, you know, the vote by mail ballots anymore. All right. So what's a provisional ballot? Oh, I'm sorry. Voting in person, no, you're right. I'm sorry. So sometimes you might go to the polls, and again, it's not quite as bad as it used to be because of the tablets, but you might get there and the poll worker says your name's not on the list. Well, ask if there's a supplemental list, ask them to look beyond just that district, look in the town, look in the county. And again, I believe on the tablet, they can look at any of them. If they still say they cannot find your name, confirm you're at the correct polling place and ask them if they can do a provisional ballot. And if they challenge that you can't vote, ask for a provisional ballot. If they still refuse to do that, there are numbers. League of Women Voters has a number that you can call. Other places have numbers you can call, or ask to see a lawyer, an election lawyer, because you have the right to vote, but you're going to vote provisionally. And this is why you're going to vote provisionally, because they want to make sure that in other words, if it goes in the machine, they can't take it out. They want to make sure that you haven't already voted. So I'm going to read this. So if you're a registered voter in the county and you moved, okay, if you've moved less than 30 days, you can vote in your old residence. But if it's more than 30 days, you have to vote in your new residence. So your name might not be on there. Maybe the reason they would say you can't vote, your registration information is not complete in the poll book, signature or something like that. You didn't provide the required ID on your registration form. So if you filled it out, let's say online, and especially I think the kids might have, younger people, if you filled it out online and didn't put in a social security number or driver's license ID for them to check, you have to supply. That's the only time they can ask you for ID. But they don't want you to let you go on the machine, because if you're not, they need to be able to check. This is one of our checks and balances. And these are some of the other reasons. There's a marking in the poll book. This is a really important one. Like I said, you applied for a mail-in ballot, but you tell the board worker you didn't apply for one, you didn't receive one, or you got it, but you don't want to. You want to vote in person. You will do a provision. You can do a provisional ballot. And no provisional ballot is counted. Sorry, let me go back. No provisional ballot is counted at the polling place. All provisional ballots are taken to the County Commissioner of Registration office after the polls close. And I've worked polls. They have a whole list. They only get like 10 of them. They have to count for all 10 of them. And what happens, they count that day, they count all the machine votes. Then they start counting all the vote by mails. And then they first count the provisional because they have to make sure you said you didn't get your vote by mail ballot and you didn't mail it in, but what if you did? Well, then they'll have a record of it. And they can say, provisional ballot's not going to count because they already voted. So you can check there's ways you can check your ballot and your voting record. I highly, highly, highly encourage you to do this. They started this, I think it was just before COVID they started this, and it was a little wonky, and it's gotten much better that you can sign up for this. And there are just two little things where people might get stuck, and there's a QR code. And again, I said there's a sheet that I have at the table with the QR codes from this presentation, so you can either take a picture of it or use it right then and there. So if you registered to vote more than 10 or 15 years ago, there's a good chance you won't be able to pull up your record by your driver's license or your social security number because they didn't necessarily ask for it. You need your voter ID. Your voter ID number you can get when you just check on your voting status, or it will be on your ballot. And worst happens, you call the county. And I have papers that are, I don't think I put them out, but I have them where it has all the information about to call the county clerk's office. And they are very, very helpful. And then you have to create a username. It's not something that you were given. It's just you can create it. It could be your first two initials. You know, it could be whatever you want. Okay. Now, you can just, so this is a little bit more about, this is just a little bit more about the things that you can, that you can see when you do this. All right. So that's the thing. When your ballot package is received at the County Board of Elections, it's scanned and the state database is updated almost immediately. So you will be able to see that you received it. There's a barcode that you will see on your vote by mail ballot, and it has a number on it. Its identifier is specific to you, and it's scanned before the envelope is even open so that they can update it. This does not show if you've been accepted or rejected. It just shows it's been received. Whether it's been accepted or rejected is entered manually after your eligibility has been verified. And usually, I think in Morris County, it's after the election ends. Every county, that's the other thing about New Jersey. We have laws, but then a lot of times the counties themselves can implement the laws the way they want to. They can do a regular envelope mailing, or they can do a postcard, or whatever they want to do. Okay. All right. So voting by mail. What I love about voting by mail, it used to be that you had to have an excuse to vote by mail. I'm traveling, I'm working, I'm sick, I'm going to be in the hospital, whatever. That is, I think that ended about 10 years ago. It's not an absentee ballot anymore. It is now a vote by mail ballot for whoever wants it. And before we had early voting, this was the way of doing early voting before Election Day. There's an urban myth that people have asked me this even to this day. I love that word, urban myth, that not all vote by mail ballots are counted. They're only counted if an election is close. That has never been the case. All vote by mail ballots are counted. You're not taking a chance your ballot won't be counted. And the beauty is you can check that now on the track your ballot and track your voting through the state. So one thing I just wanted to say about vote by mail ballots, if someone is registered to vote from the address in a town, so let's say you're registered in Morristown, but you want your ballot to go to a different location, like you want it to go to your school, someone's in the school, that becomes your mailing address. The ballot cannot be remailed. It's technically a federal offense to remail. I believe it's a federal offense to remail your ballot, to remail the ballot. It's supposed to be sent to the address where you're voting from. And okay. All right. All right. Voting by mail. Voting by mail ballots will not be automatically sent to every registered voter. That only happened in 2020, and there's still people that expect them to get some. I always repeat that. They will, however, automatically be sent to voters who have previously requested vote by mail for all future elections. What happens is if you use the form, it gives you more choices. If it's just the vote by mail form, it gives you more choices in terms of being able to, for future elections, for just the primary, just the general election. Whereas when you check it on the initial registration, it only allows you to check it for all future elections. So this is a little video just to give you a break from listening to me. And let's see if we can get this to work. Let's see. It was created by the Monmouth County League of Women Voters. So it's going to say, go to Freehold. You will not be going to Freehold. If it's the county, it's Morristown is our county office. I'm sorry here, we're having a little technical issue. It worked when I tried it earlier, and now it's not working, unfortunately. Sorry. Oh, there it opened about 10 times. Okay. All right. And I had to make my pointer really big and purple because before I couldn't find it when it went onto the new screens. So bear with me, and there you go.
In this short video, we will show you 3 things: what your mail-in ballot looks like when you get it, how to fill out your mail-in ballot, and how to prepare your ballot for mailing and return it. You will receive a vote-by-mail ballot in your mailbox. Look for it. Some mass marketers send items in remarkably similar envelopes. Be sure that your ballot is not mistaken for junk mail. The envelope you receive will contain 2 inner envelopes, your ballot, and an instruction sheet. If you do not receive your vote-by-mail ballot, please call the county office or go to the Board of Elections office in Freehold to pick one up in person. All COVID-19 requirements are in place. To complete the ballot, you must completely fill in the small circle in the box bearing the name of the candidate of your choice. If you choose to write in a candidate in the column furthest to the right on your ballot, fill in the name of that person, and you must also fill in the circle next to that name. Use a blue or black pen. Do not use a marker or pencil. Ballots are read by machine, and your ballot will not be counted if the machine does not pick up your markings. If you spoil a ballot, meaning you make a mistake and want to vote for a different candidate, or if you make any other accidental marks on the ballot, contact the county office for a new ballot. Ballots that have been crossed out or written on other than writing in the name of a personal choice will not be counted. Okay. Then prepare your ballot for mailing. You need to complete the certification envelope, and you need to use the return envelope for mailing. The 2 envelopes in the packet are slightly different in size. The smaller one is the certification envelope. It acts the same way the poll book does when you vote at the polls. The larger one is called the return envelope, and we'll explain how to use that in a minute. First, fold your ballot and insert it into the smaller envelope, the certification envelope. There is a perforated flap on the certification envelope. Do not remove the flap on the certification envelope. The elections office uses this flap to compare your signature to the one they have on record. Your signature is proof that the ballot was cast by you and no one else. Once your signature is verified, the flap is removed by the county election officers so that your vote remains secret. Next, fill out the required information on the certification envelope, then sign it. If anyone helps you fill out your ballot, you must identify that person as the assistor. The assistor must also sign the certification envelope, then seal it. Now you're going to use the return envelope. Insert the completed certification envelope into the slightly larger return envelope that will get your ballot to the County Board of Elections. Before you seal the return envelope, turn it over. Be sure your name and address and the barcode show through the glassine window. If anyone else, except a postal mail carrier, will be carrying your ballot to the post office or the ballot drop box, you must identify that person as the bearer. There is a space on the front of the return envelope that must be filled out and signed. This is to be sure that the ballot goes directly from your hands through carriers you authorized to the Board of Elections.
Okay, thank you. Let's go back to.
Good evening and welcome to the Art and Science of Measuring Public Opinion.
That is Peggy.
I'm Peggy Dellinger, the president of the League of Women.
One of our people that does a lot in Monmouth County. She actually was one of the people that originally created the part of this presentation. So the signature curing process. This is something that is so important. League of Women Voters and other groups helped pass the bill, and it was a big deal to incorporate signature curing because probably about 30% of vote by mail ballots were not counted because the signatures didn't match. Just like I said, my signature might have changed, or, you know, some people have their nice signature and then you got the grocery store credit card signature. So they do a really good job of comparing. The commissioners look at it if there's any question. There's half Dems, half Republicans, and then the letter is sent out if there's any questions. Now, one thing you have to be careful about, though, if anybody gets the letter, make sure you get it back by the deadline. And mail-in ballots would not be rejected due to any defect arising out of or relating to the preparation or mailing of the ballot or envelope that was not reasonably caused by the voters, such as a torn envelope and missing or insufficient glue to allow the ballot to be sealed. We did have one year where they ordered the ballots from a new printer and the seal did not work. It was not good. Okay. There are secure drop-off locations for your ballot, which I'm not sure she mentioned in the video. And those are located all over. I have here, 75% of voters that do a vote by mail ballot bring them to these drop boxes, and they're only for mail-in ballots. There's one, oh, wait, hold on, sorry. There is one in Mendham Borough, outside of the county, it's on Coal Hill Road. It's the outside Borough Hall. There's also one in Morristown outside the Board of Elections. And this is a QR code if you want to do them. And like I think I said, you can drop them off in any mailbox within your county. So that is nice. You don't have to go to one that's in the Mendham Township. All right, the truth about vote by mail. So vote by mail helps to increase turnout. In 2020, the election saw record turnout. And the question is that use of non-traditional voting methods associated with the change in voter turnout? This is from the United States Census Bureau. People living in the quartile of states that used non-traditional voting methods at the highest rate in 2020 also saw a larger change in turnout between the 2016 and 2020 election than that of people living in the remaining states. It was up by 7.7%. And that is really, I find it personally sad that we all have the right to vote. There are countries where people are fighting for it and so few people vote. So we want to make it as easy and available for everybody to be able to vote. Now, this is from Reuters. There's a lot of election security. Their anomalies in voting are easy to spot. After the 2020 election, a months-long analysis by the AP found fewer than 475 cases of potential voter fraud in the 6 battleground states. There's an anecdote of people receiving an application for a past tenant or someone that's dead, or hypothetically they could fill this out and sign it. Well, you know what? It would be caught largely because of that voting, the signature catching. There's so many different ways that you can catch. For example, somebody was telling me from the county clerk's office today, the other day, somebody applied for a vote by mail ballot. And it was obvious that it looked like one person had filled out both forms. They called, they said, nope, 2 separate people. I did this. The other person said, I did this. Thing is, they will send them the ballot, but if one person tries to sign the actual ballot, it will be caught. And I really have faith. I know in this county, Ann, who's the county clerk, told me that she's been there 10 years. They've had cases where fraud has been contested, but they have never actually had a case of fraud proven. And for example, from Reuters, over 3.3 million voters cast for the presidential run in Arizona alone. The state had the highest number of potential fraud cases, 198 out of 3.3 million. That's like nothing. And the AP also found no signs of a coordinated effort and reported that virtually every case was based on an individual acting alone to cast additional ballots. So, okay, this is a video that we can watch. I'm not going to watch it, but there will be a QR code for this, so you can see it if you'd like to watch it. And it explains a lot about voter fraud, but we're not going to take any time on this now.
Have you ever wondered about how we secure elections? That's a fair question. Security has only...
Anyway.
Have you ever wondered about how we secure elections?
Okay, and I probably went past the one that I want. Okay, so, I love this little, I had to put this in here. First of all, many safeguards are in place. There's identity verification, barcodes, secure drop-off locations, penalties, it's illegal, post-election audits. And I love this little video that says, Americans are more likely to be struck by lightning than commit mail voting fraud. And it's very unlikely you're going to get struck by lightning. So this is a picture of the barcode. Mail-in ballot envelopes in New Jersey have the unique barcode. They track the ballot and they are scanned as soon as they come in before anything is opened. And even when they do open it, that inside envelope that has your ballot in it, that is not opened until the election day. And it's separated from your identity. So no one knows how you voted. It's just as secure and anonymous as if you went to a voting machine. And actually even better in certain ways because there's a record of it that you can track. Okay, this is the important thing. Anyone, it's a crime. Anyone who commits voter fraud using a mail ballot risks severe criminal and civil penalties. You could have up to 5 years in jail and $10,000 in fines for each act of fraud under federal law in any state. Okay, so that's, to me, the important thing. These are some of the reasons a ballot might be rejected. I checked with our county. Some of the other things might be the voter moved out of the county, power of attorney wasn't right, incomplete a sister portion. Let me just see, signature doesn't match. Even though they were sent a letter, they didn't return it. The ballot wasn't enclosed. The voter's deceased. The voter registration is missing information. They need ID. Incomplete bearer portion, incomplete a sister portion. The mail bearer, because they're only allowed to carry, I think, 3 of them or too many, that kind of thing. So and it used to be, the chart we had before this, we had to update it, is 30% was signature missing. So it's really nice that the signature missing has gotten so small, it's just put in other. And I don't know if you can read the other ones. It says ballot received after the deadline, certification was missing, or the certificate was not signed. And that's one of the reasons I showed you the video, because I want you to really see what you can do. So now that you know so much about voting, would you like to get involved in your community and be a part of democracy? You can become a poll worker. I have applications here. There's also a postcard, if you don't want to fill it out now, that you can send it to the county clerk's office. They like, take folders, take applications. We want people to use them. So that's my little civic plug. And I just want to, in terms of resources, one of the things we used a lot was the vote. This is the voter web, the New Jersey vote. It's vote.nj.gov. I know you can't read it very well, but there's a lot of things that you can check on there. And again, I have a QR code that you can look at on the sheet, or you can look at it here. And I do want to thank, so we're pretty much finished now, but I wanted to thank Ann Grassi, who's the county clerk, and Dale Kramer, who is the administrator for the Board of Elections, because they really were very helpful. They answered my questions. They gave me materials to hand out today. And then also I wanted to thank Debbie McCumber, who is on our Zoom call right now. You can't see her, but I can. And also Megan Davis, who is from Western Warren County, who helped me. She did a lot of the research on all of the safety and the fraud and things like that. All right, so now we're at the part of our presentation where I'm going to answer some questions. So the first thing I did was we had some questions submitted on our online. So one person asked, what's the purpose of the league? What's the purpose of the league, and is it partisan? So I think I've kind of answered that. We are here to help voters be educated and become voters and support democracy. We do that through debates. We do it through events like this. We do it through having tables and registering voters. And in this county, it's not even so much registering voters, it's getting out the vote. So that's where vote by mail is very important, especially with young people. That's one of our arms. We're pushing a lot to get incarcerated people re-registered, to get young people to be good citizens for the rest of their life. We also do a lot of advocacy at the state level, the national level, and even at the local level. As you can see, we help get the hearing done. We help with voter registration dates. Anyway, so there's another question. I'm a college student attending school in another state. I've been voting in Mendham Township, which is their hometown, and where my parents still live while at school. Once I graduate, am I still able to vote in my hometown if I move somewhere else temporarily? Example, I'm renting an apartment in the city. In the city, I'm guessing he means New York City, while working there, but never intending to live there permanently. Liza, do you want to answer this, or you want me to answer this? All right. They are allowed to do that, right? Yeah, why don't you answer to be sure?
Sure, yeah. So again, it's in my nature and my legal training to hedge. Basically, if that person hasn't established a new domicile, if they haven't established a new home where they intend to remain, where they, are sort of enmeshed in that home, where if they leave that home, that's the place they intend to return to, then their domicile remains that original domicile, their previous domicile, the place where their parents live, and they can vote there. So again, it's flexible, and the truth is it depends. But in the way this question is phrased, my sort of instinct is that yes, what this person is describing is that they haven't set up a new domicile yet. They haven't established a new permanent home yet, so they can still vote in the previous place that they consider their permanent home.
Yeah, I mean, I see it like if somebody grew up in wherever, I live in Madison, if they grow up in Madison, that's their connection to wherever, and they're living in New York City or Newark or whatever, they're not connected there. That's kind of the thing that I like to say. They're not connected. They're allowed to vote where they're connected. Am I correct? Okay. All right, 3, I've been voting using vote by mails. I'm very diligent about changing the address that the ballots are sent to, depending on where I will be at the time. If I forget and a ballot is mailed to my house while I'm at school, can my parents forward it to me? No, they cannot forward it. What they can do, and this is where I checked on this to be sure, they can call the county clerk's office and ask for a duplicate ballot, and they will mail it to the mailing address. And there are situations, I haven't had it, but I know people that even they've gotten vote by mail ballots in the past. You didn't get it this year. You call the county clerk's office, they will mail it to you. It's stamped duplicate. So again, if that comes back, they're going to definitely make sure that they didn't get an original one. And, and that's where it happens. Yep.
The student can also come home.
Thank you. Someone said in the audience, the student can also, I'm repeating because we have the Zoom call here. The student can come home, and that's the advantage. They could pick it up because it starts going out the end of September. I don't remember the exact date. It's on my form. It's the end of September. They start going out. Very likely the parents are going up for college, Parents' Day in October, or they're coming home, or they can come home and vote in person if they didn't get the ballot at all. And one of the things I've learned with college students, especially, is that it used to be when my daughter went to college, every year she moved, she would have had to have changed her address every year. A lot more colleges are giving students a mailbox that they use for all 4 years that they're there. So it makes it much easier for them to do that. Okay. I have the following question. Can the ACLU explain why it was okay to join a case against Thomas Bio when the Democrats themselves challenged the integrity of a class of young voters? They went without charges from the ACLU. Can Ms. Weisberg explain why she only challenged the Republican? FYI, the average age of the Republican pool of challenged voters was 42. The Democrats' challenged pool of voters had an average age of just under 30 years of age. I don't know if you.
Yeah, sure. So just to back up and very briefly, provide some more context of this question. So this person is referring to a case where a losing candidate challenged the results of a local election because he claimed that a number of voters had voted illegally because they weren't actually residents of the election district where they cast their ballot. And I want to say that I actually appreciate this question. I think it's a fair one. And the fact is that the reason this case got to court was because that candidate initiated it and sought to overturn the election results, right? And what happened thereafter was that that candidate's opponent filed what's called a cross petition. And so that opponent said, basically, if the court were to agree with the losing candidate that this group of voters voted illegally, if the court were to find that a sufficient number of voters were not actually residents of the places that they voted and invalidated a sufficient number of votes to flip the election results, then only in that case would the court consider the cross petition and then consider the group of voters that the opponent called into question only after the original petition was filed. So this is a complicated way of saying that the ACLU of New Jersey filed an amicus brief in this case to try to lend its perspective to the matter. We were not adverse to any of the parties. The brief was not partisan in any way. But the brief was directed at the original petition, the reason that the case was in court. And that original petition was filed by one candidate who sought to overturn the election results. Now, maybe down the line, if the court had granted that petition and said, yes, such and such group of voters voted illegally, we're throwing away those votes, then it may have had to consider the cross petition by the Democratic candidate calling into question additional voters. And maybe at that point, we would have raised our hands again and said, hey, actually, those are the same tactics that the original petition employed. And we have some of the same questions about those tactics. That would have been a sincere possibility. But that didn't come to pass, right? The the original petition was dismissed. It was actually voluntarily withdrawn. And so that simply didn't come to pass. So all to say, the answer to this question is frankly a boring procedural one. But I think the person who asked it raises the good point that ultimately, after this initial petition was filed, the cross petition mirrored some of the same tactics that the original petition asserted. And so we didn't have the opportunity for procedural reasons to address those, and we didn't have to address the cross petition. But, you know, in a different scenario, things may have looked somewhat different.
All right, I think we have one or two more questions. All right. Would the folks on this panel defend voters who are over the age of 30, don't live in Mendham Township for more than a year, and wish to continue casting ballots here? Yes or no? I guess they're asking if this situation comes up again, would people defend people?
So
I think that's what they're asking.
yeah, so I guess that this is in response to the same type of case. And for further context, the reason that age is being asked about here is because, so I had the opportunity to write this amicus brief with a lawyer named Yael Bromberg, and she happens to be one of the foremost national experts in youth voting rights. And she saw this case and she identified that the majority of the challenged voters in this initial petition were young people. And so she raised concerns with the court about violations of the 26th Amendment, which provides unique protections to the voting rights of young people. And so I think what this question is getting at is sort of, in the future, if a similar case were to arise, but the challenged voters were over 30, and I think it said something like didn't live in Mendham Township for more than a year, would we get involved? I guess the answer is that the burden is on a person challenging the validity of a vote to prove that that vote is invalid, right? The registration process does a really good job of making sure that people vote where they're eligible to vote, right? That's the whole reason we have this process on the front end. Now, when something comes in on the back end and there's a challenge to a voter, the burden is on the challenger to establish that that voter voted illegally. And so I would certainly not be in a position to prejudge any future cases, except to say that, you know, as I tried to sort of emphasize earlier, domicile is a flexible concept. If this theoretical over 30 voter, you know, if their domicile remained in Mendham Township, even if they'd been away for a year, that's a possibility. And maybe that person would still be eligible to vote here. And maybe if that voter were challenged, there would be occasion for nonpartisan groups to weigh in about that. But it's a lot of layers of speculation about the future.
Thank you. Okay.
Do you want to answer a question from the back?
Oh, sorry. Yep.
No, I was just going to say an example would be an executive who gets a temporary assignment for a year to get 30 time, and then he'll
Okay.
Yeah.
So that shows there's so many layers, because what you're saying, somebody in the audience said that what if somebody is an executive, they're domiciled overseas, or the military, or anything you're doing overseas, you do not lose your right to vote. So you would still be allowed to vote in your hometown, quote unquote home. Okay. In 2022, both Democrats and Republicans challenged the residency of multiple voters. We may have answered this already. Using vote by mail ballots. Per state law, candidates and parties are empowered to challenge the residency of voters at the polling place. Given the days of early voting and early counting of VBM ballots, challenging a VBM ballot when it's opened is impractical. How do you envision guaranteeing that only actual residents vote in our elections?
Yeah, so I guess I would just say that we guarantee that only actual residents vote through the registration process and all of the laws and regulations surrounding that process that Barbara spoke to earlier. There is a statutory provision that allows people to challenge voters. That's in place. But again, you know, the burden is on that challenger to come forward with evidence that an individual voted illegally. But all to say, there are lots and lots of existing safeguards. And as Barbara pointed out, instances of voter fraud are vanishingly rare.
Right. Let's see. All right. If someone moved away from home for college, graduated from college, and now lives in another town or city, can they continue to vote in the town they grew up in, even if they do not live there and do not pay property taxes there? At what point is the person no longer a resident? I think basically you've answered this, right?
Yeah.
And property taxes have nothing to do with voting, because if you're a renter, you don't pay property taxes. So I'll give you a short and sweet on that one. Is it legal for parents to send and vote by mail ballots on behalf of their kids if the child did not make it back to their parents' residence to fill out the ballot himself or herself? We've answered this also. No, they cannot send it to the student. So those are the questions that I have. Those are the questions that I have that were submitted. Does anybody have any questions from the audience? I'll just tell you, I'm going to repeat it because I don't think the on Zoom people will be able to hear you. Any questions, comments? Yes.
So basically, in summary,
I'm going to ask you to read. Not be able to see them.
okay, so basically, in summary, if people live in this town or any town at one point and they have not claimed another town or location as their main home, their primary residence, they can still vote where they used to live, regardless of age.
I'll let you.
Yeah. Age has nothing to do with it except for the fact that young people are especially transitory, right? And so young people are sort of especially likely to be moving around, to be unsettled, to be uncertain of where a job will take them next, you know, where their permanent home will be in the future. But I think this summary that you gave is a fair one, that the fact that of someone being sort of temporarily away from Mendham Township, for example, doesn't mean that their domicile is not in Mendham Township. It may be, or it may not be. But it depends on all those factors we talked about. It sort of is a holistic analysis that's not necessarily easy to sort of put clean labels on or clean definitions on. But it depends on a whole number of factors, but it is certainly possible that someone could be temporarily away from their permanent primary home, their domicile, without having established a new one. And although they're away, that permanent home remains their permanent home, and that's the appropriate place from which they vote.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I want to challenge you on this.
Okay.
Okay. So the reason I want to challenge you this is because it seems too loosey-goosey for me.
It is.
Okay.
That's
And
why
we're talking about
I hate being a
elections,
lawyer.
and it's very passionate on both sides. Thank God we're Americans and we can vote the way we want to. But so let's just take, it seems like there's an open-ended answer, because somebody could be temporarily, my daughter's been living in Washington since 2014. She's eventually moving back to New Jersey. Does that mean she can still vote here? I think scenarios are good.
Yeah, so I appreciate you pressing me on this. The fact is, everything in my legal training says I'm not going to give you a cut and dry answer without
lawyer.
exactly without all the facts. I cannot tell you because it's flexible. It is.
Facts. I gave you enough facts for this one. She lives there since 2015. She's planning on coming back. It's not her primary residence because someday she's moving back here.
Sorry, what's not her primary residence?
So Virginia's not her primary
Uh-huh.
residence, right? Because she's still thinking about coming back here. So tell me what information you're missing to make an answer.
Like I said, so there are a whole number of additional factors, right? You know, a court. So if this came to court,
I
right?
don't want it to come to court. I want to be able to say to my daughter, you can still vote in Mendham.
Got it. Okay. So you've described a person who this remains their permanent place. This is the place they intend to return to from
Yes.
when they're away.
Right.
And they have not established a permanent residence anywhere else. That
Define establishing a permanent residence.
so
Driver's license, paying taxes in that
Those-
state.
those can be factors,
Okay.
right?
What are the other factors that need to be a permanent residence?
So I listed some that courts give, but it's an open list. It's not a finite set of factors.
So where is that list?
They are derived from case law.
Okay, so you really don't have an answer.
I've given you my answer, which is I am not in a position to give legal advice to anyone here. Your daughter, unfortunately, is not my client. But in the situation you're describing, I can give you probably a likely, what the scenario you've described sounds a lot like Mendham remains for permanent home, but I don't have enough information and I do not represent your daughter, so I cannot give her legal advice.
Right, so the challenge becomes, right? The challenge becomes that elections will always be questioned until some of these could be guidelines and guidelines and guardrails as to what this looks like. Because until that happens, it seems very like it's this way or it's that way. It doesn't seem very clear.
Yeah, unfortunately, there aren't absolutely clear answers, but like I said,
The thing is, it's very flexible. That's the slide said, it's a flexible legal term. There is no cut and dry term. It's interpretation.
Okay, so then the reverse side, right, is to say, how would somebody get in trouble for voting the wrong way?
we can move closer to the microphone so everybody can hear what you say.
Okay.
It's
All right, I
somebody
can-
challenges them. That's the thing. No one's going to.
Am I on the gong show? Somebody's going to pull me off?
Yeah.
No, so the question I have is the flip side, right? Is how do you know you're not going to get in trouble for doing something because you don't have these guardrails?
Let me try to summarize non-legally,
Yeah.
and you say.
Yeah.
My interpretation is that you could go in any town, in any place in the United States, probably. And if you wanted to make trouble and you wanted to challenge somebody, you probably can. Whether or not they'd win in court,
Right.
that's another story. So I
So vote
believe
we want
Liza
to.
is saying there is no, it's not like check A, B, C, D, and you're fine.
Okay.
It's individual to every situation. Am I correct in my summary of that?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I know what you're saying. You want to find out, is it safe to vote this way? Okay.
Right.
How many years have people voted this way and never, ever been challenged? That's the thing. How many challenges have
Good point.
ever come up in New Jersey in general?
Mhm.
This is a situation that I think people should not be afraid of. That hopefully, it never went anywhere, went to court, but never did anything more than that because I think, they never finished the trial.
Right.
What was the reason for that? Why did
There
they
wasn't
withdraw?
enough evidence.
Well,
There
but
wasn't
that's
certification on the documents they both.
right. So yes, you can never stop. This is a very litigious, I'm not saying it right, society.
Right.
Anybody has the right to challenge something.
Right.
Will it happen?
Right.
But it's very safe. It's very safe to vote this way. Obviously, nothing came of it. It would be different if they turned out they contested 33 or whatever ballots and 5 of them were thrown out. But that did not happen. And you had a comment?
I was just going to say, I have a son who graduated from the university.
Why don't you know what? Come up here because they can't hear you online otherwise. Thank you.
I have a son who graduated from University of Miami. He was a TV anchor person. And after he got out of school, he was in Michigan, he was in Bakersfield, California, and he wanted to vote. And he has a right to vote. And I'm a lawyer, and he asked me, and he said, Dad, where can I vote? And I said, where do you consider yourself home? Well, Michigan's not my home. Bakersfield's not my home. I don't care what happens in those places, but I do care what happens in the place I consider home. So he has a constitutional right to be able to voice his opinion in one place, not two places, but one place. And if somebody was to challenge him, they would have a burden to prove that he actually created a home different from what he's saying. And a judge would probably also take a look at, well, here's this person. They went through all the trouble of filling out a vote by mail ballot. They did all of these efforts. So I'm going to have a presumption that this particular individual really feels that the place where they put their vote is the place where they want to participate in that community in a democratic way. And if we don't have people voting, we don't have a democracy. And I think this is what you guys are trying to do. And thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. And thank you. Thank you. I think you really summarized it very well. And I believe you're a lawyer. Am I correct in that? No, that's okay. You summarized it very well, because Liza's being very careful. You kind of gave a specific and gave a summary. And and I think that's like, I think I said, I'd see the questions. I think I said before that it's where you feel connected. Like you said, his son did not feel connected, and he didn't vote anyplace else. That's the other thing. Remember, you can't vote in two places. He only registered in one, and that's where he's voting. So, yep.
Yeah, you mentioned the homeless population, they have a right to vote. And I know I'm before I knew that they have a place to go to, which is a place that is still a right to vote. That would be not
Right. So that's, yeah, okay. Yes. So homeless, yes. Homeless is a perfect example that, and because a lot of homeless, they might go to, I forget the group, there's a group in a place in Morristown they may go to, or Nourish, New Jersey to get their food, or they might get mail, or they might get a bit, they're homeless, but they might still have a cell phone and get a bill. That's where they consider their home. And that's kind of, yeah. So somebody else had a hand up? Yep.
My question, I think, is more for our lawyers.
Eliza. Okay.
Sorry. So you mentioned a couple times if a person never established a domicile. Can you share with us some examples of factors that you would use to determine if someone had established a domicile?
Okay. So the question is, if someone had never established a domicile someplace else, right, they could vote, where the domicile is. Am I correct? I'm paraphrasing a little bit.
And set of lines that they've never established a domicile.
Okay.
So I'm asking the other question is, again, in the courts, what factors would be used to determine if someone had indeed?
So you're asking that, I have to repeat, if someone's in court, what factors would be used to determine that someone had established a domicile? Liza.
Right. So again, and I'm sorry to do this, it's an open-ended sort of inquiry. There's not a checklist that a court would run through, but a court might look to a previous case, for example, that said, well, this person has in Mendham Township, this is where their magazine subscriptions come to. They're members of the social clubs here. They spend 80% of their time throughout the year here. They, have their mailing address here. These are all the sort of factors, and they sort of all add up to the idea of the place where someone considers their true home, where they have a stake in the community and the outcome of decisions that are made there. and where when they're away for some period of time, they come back to. So those are just, again, it's flexible. Those are some things that courts have pointed out in the past that they might look at.
I think you had yours up first, Mike. I think you did first. What was your question?
Read some cases when cases hold on. Some another factor that courts look at where you've in fact chosen to register to vote, because that's a way that we're declaring that we're.
So the question is that you've read some cases when we had this, and that the courts look at where you chose to vote to determine domicile? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I didn't mention that only because I thought the previous speaker had done a great job of saying that, and I agree with that, right? Yeah. If someone has taken that affirmative step to register to vote in the place where they're eligible, and to sort of make that that warranty that that's where they live and vote, then that's a factor too, and establishes. I think the previous gentleman, I didn't catch his name, said it creates a presumption of sorts.
Yep.
I can certainly understand someone not living here who lives in another state wanting to vote in national election. But I think that the local election should be restricted to local residents, local candidates. The person who, I'm sorry, but if your child is not living here, how does that child or that young adult know the local issues enough to vote for a local election?
So the question is that you can understand, if you're not living here, but you consider this your domicile, voting in federal elections, but not local elections, because how do they know enough about the election or the people to make an intelligent vote? I can be very sarcastic in that one and say,
So can I.
do a lot of people that live here know enough to vote? But that's not the legal answer. I guess I don't know. What else can you say to
Well,
that?
it raises a good legal point, which is that there's no legal requirement that someone be an informed voter in order to vote. But I think, to your sort of broader point, it depends on the voter, right? But you may not be giving some young people quite enough credit, right? If they're away, but they are remaining sort of in touch with their community such that they've decided that they're going to go through the effort to, vote in a local municipal election or what have you, they may be as well informed as the next person. So all to say, depends a little. Again, I've said that a million times. Yeah.
Just for the record, my son is a journalist and he's very well.
Okay, so the gentleman who gave us the summary before about his son that moves a lot, he's a journalist and he's very well informed. And that, again, that's the beauty of the internet, like Vote 411 or wherever, you can find out anything as much as anybody can. Don't have to live here to know what's going on. So any other questions? Yes.
I think it's more of a comment, as Weisberg can speak to this. Some of these examples use the verb live, adjective living. Well, if they don't live here, or if they live here, I mean, these are very serious allegations, right? And I think actually where domicile has more of a concrete definition than the word live, because it might seem clear to subjectively one person, but you find an object. So I suppose.
Wait, so let me summarize that part of it. So you're saying that people are using the word live or lived here, but right here saying it tonight, but domicile has a more concrete definition.
I would venture to say that domicile seems a little bit more solid than the word live.
Oh, domicile seems more solid than lived.
Yeah, so
okay.
people are saying, well, if they don't live here, then well, if someone isn't living here or someone is living here. Living, I think living is a red herring. I think it's misplaced. I think
living is a red herring that's misplaced. Okay.
Continues to be domicile, and domicile, which is a very sexy legal word.
Right.
Whereas live is easier to understand and interpret and
Well, so domicile is easier but that's the other thing I was going to say. There's probably a legal term for domicile, and there's the general understanding of what domicile means.
So
But anyway, so your comment based on that is,
I suppose if we have Ms. Weisberg just in a court's opinion, would a judge weigh the word domicile as the legal definition, or would a court take allegations of whether someone's living there or lives?
okay. So you're saying when the court is determining whether or not they can vote there, are they using the word live there, or domicile?
Correct.
Okay.
And please.
Great. So great question. I think what you're getting at is that when people say, I live here, I live there, they can mean a whole number of different things. When one person says he lives in Atlanta and another person says, oh, he lives in Mendham Township, those things could, potentially both be true, right? And that word can mean different things to different people depending on the context in which it's said. And it's also possible, as I mentioned earlier, that people can have more than one residence. But as you said, I think the reason courts employ a sort of different definition, they don't use the word live, they use the word domicile, because it does mean something fixed rather than the word live, which has a sort of changeable meaning depending on who's talking and what the context is.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Yes.
I wanted to kind of acknowledge one this word here and push back a tiny bit against it, that nothing came of all of those challenges in our community, because
You know what? Come up. It's
the reason people are asking.
talk up. No, come up front because I want to give you the Zoom.
I think the reason that people are asking, and Tom's son asked the same question, am I allowed to do this, is because it did have a cost here. It costs a lot of time, it costs a lot of money, it costs a lot of angst. I personally had to make phone calls to people to say you're listed on this official court document, and that's scary. And so I know it's so vanishingly rare, but the reason that people are looking for concrete answers that I know we can't provide is because it did have a legitimate impact on our community. So I feel like we're coming at it from kind of a different spot, because it's not something that happens very often, but it did happen here and it happened very recently. And so it's still pretty raw for a lot of people. And we hear stories about people who were named in these lawsuits, and even though nothing happened, it was months of angst, and they say they'll never vote by mail again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really appreciate you saying that. And one of the reasons why we at the ACLU wanted to weigh in is because we were really concerned about this chilling effect, this deterrent effect in the future, that folks would be really scared about voting again. And I acknowledge that and appreciate that you sort of bring this personal perspective to it. And when I said vanishingly rare, I was talking about voter fraud, about actual illegal voting. I was not, of course, yeah, there are instances where these challenges come up. What's vanishingly rare is people actually abusing or manipulating voting systems to vote illegally. And so I think that I hopefully reinforces your point that it's important that people feel safe voting, and that it's we should not have to worry so much, and there hopefully should not be substantial attention, effort, and time devoted to policing people's votes, because instances of actual illegal voting are very, very rare. So apologies if I
And could you talk about rareness in terms of having the odds of having your vote challenged then?
Yeah. So that's a great question. So Ms. Spierig asked, could you talk about rareness in terms of how often are voters actually challenged? I actually I don't know the answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Still rare.
Yeah. I think it is. Yeah.
Coming at it from a different angle here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's rare, but it makes a lasting mark for it. It's really scary to, like, you know, maybe you wake up at college and learn that someone's accused you of voting illegally. If that happened to me, of course, I would think twice. The next time I cast my ballot, I'd be really nervous about that. Hopefully the results of the election here and what everyone here in this community, I think is sort of come out to say tonight is that, you know, there was no instance, a court could not find, and the petition was withdrawn, an instance of illegal voting. And obviously that should give us some comfort, but it's not quite enough because it feels really personal what happened here. And I totally get that.
Okay. And I will say that is one of the reasons we're doing this presentation, is to hopefully get over this situation. And obviously there's no guarantee it will happen. It won't happen again. Hopefully it won't. And I think you've also seen how hopefully people have an understanding now of who can, and that even if they're challenged, they did what was right. They didn't, like they didn't do what was wrong, so that they would be okay. Yes, you don't want to go through a challenge, but so any other questions? Well, I am going to stop sharing my screen. And I'm going to thank you all for coming tonight and tolerating the fact that this is being broadcast. So it's a little bit different, a little harder to do. And say goodnight to everybody. Thank you. Okay. And